Yananjana Salakaya Dakshurmilitam Jena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Mano Vishnam Sapitam Chena Bhutale Swayam Rupagada Mayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Sri Guru Sri Juta Parakamalam Sri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Sri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Ragana Dhanmitam Tang Sajivam Vadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakanditangscha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakapajubhascha Kripa Sindhu Bevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Narayanam Namaskritya Niramachaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudidayet Nasta Presho Vadreshu Nityam Bhagavat Shevaya Bhagavad Yuttama Shloke Bhakti Bhavati Naistaki. Today is Thursday, August 28th, 2025. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Creation of the Fourth Order, Chapter 29, talks between Narada and King Pratina Bhari. Text number 61. Anamimamutsvija Swasantam Purusho Yata Karmatmana Hitam Bhukte Tadrishene Tarena Va Sayanami Manutsrija Swasantam Purusho Yata Karmatmana Hitam Bhukte Tadrishene Tarena Va Tamma Purusho Yata Karmatmanya Hitam Bhukte Tadrishene Tarena Va. Please chant. Shvasantam Purusho Yata Karmatmanya Hitam Bhukte Tadrishene Tarena Va. Sayanam Imamutsrija Swasantam Purusho Yata Karmatmanya Hitam Bhukte Tadrishene Tarena Va. Shayanam Imamutsrija Vasantam Purusho Yata Karmam Hatam Bhukte Tadrishene Tarena Va. These synonyms, please repeat. Shayanam. Come on, computer. It always, when I get up to give class, and it starts doing weird things. Like right now, it's on dark screen and it won't get up. Shayanam, lying down on the bed. Imam, this body. Utsrija, after giving up. Shwasantam, breathing. Purushaha, the living entity. Yata, as. Karma, activity. Atmani, in the mind. Ahitam, executed. Bhukte, enjoys. Tadrishena, by a similar body. Itarena, by a different body. Va, or. Translation by His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada. The living entity, while dreaming, gives up the actual living body. Through the activities of his mind and intelligence, he acts in another body, either as a god or a dog. After giving up this gross body, the living entity enters either an animal body or a demigod's body on this planet or on another planet. He thus enjoys the results of the actions of his past life. Please repeat. The living entity, while dreaming, gives up the actual living body. Through the activities of his mind and intelligence, he acts in another body, either as a god or a dog. After giving up this gross body, the living entity enters either an animal body or a demigod's body on this planet or on another planet. He thus enjoys the results of the actions of his past life. Purport. Although the root of distress and happiness is the mind, intelligence, and ego, a gross body is still required as an instrument for enjoyment. The gross body may change, but the subtle body continues to act. Unless the living entity gets another gross body, he will have to continue in a subtle body or a ghostly body. One becomes a ghost when the subtle body acts without the help of the instrumental gross body. As stated in this verse, Shayanam iman utsrija shwasantam. The gross body may lie on a bed and rest, and even though the machinery of the gross body is working, the living entity may leave, go into a dream, and return to the gross body. When he returns to the body, he forgets his dream. Similarly, when the living entity takes on another gross body, he forgets the present gross body. The conclusion is that the subtle body, mind, intelligence, and ego create an atmosphere with desires and ambitions that the living entity enjoys in the subtle body. Actually, the living entity is in the subtle body, even though the gross body apparently changes, and even though he inhabits the gross body on various planets. All the activities performed by the living entity in the subtle body are called illusory because they are not permanent. Liberation means getting out of the clutches of the subtle body. Liberation from the gross body simply involves the transmigration of the soul from one gross body to another. When the mind is educated in Krishna consciousness or higher consciousness in the mode of goodness, one is transferred either to the upper heavenly planets or to the spiritual world, the Vaikuntha planets. One therefore has to change his consciousness by cultivating knowledge received from Vedic instructions from the Supreme Personality of Godhead through the disciplic succession. If we train the subtle body in this life by always thinking about Krishna, we will transfer to Krishna Loka after leaving the gross body. This is confirmed by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Janma karma cha me divyam evam yobiti tatvataha Tva deham punarjanma naiti mamiti sorjana. One who knows the transcendental nature of my appearance and activities does not, upon leaving the body, take his birth again in this material world, but attains my eternal abode, O Arjuna. Samgita 4:9. Thus the change of the gross body is not very important, but the change of the subtle body is important. The Krishna consciousness movement is educating people to enlighten the subtle body. The perfect example in this regard is Ambarish Maharaj, who always engaged his mind on the lotus feet of Lord Krishna. Savaimana Krishna Padaravindayoho. Similarly, in this life, we should always fix our mind on the lotus feet of Krishna, who is present in his Archa Vigraha, the incarnation of the deity in the temple. We should also always engage in his worship. If we engage our speech in describing the activities of the Lord, and our ears in hearing about his pastimes, and if we follow the regulative principles to keep the mind intact for advancing in Krishna consciousness, we shall certainly be elevated to the spiritual platform. Very conclusive. Then at the time of death, the mind, intelligence, and ego will no longer be materially contaminated. The living entity is present, and the mind, intelligence, and ego are also present. When the mind, intelligence, and ego are purified, all the active senses of the living entity become spiritual. Thus, the living entity attains his Satchit Ananda form. The Supreme Lord is always in his Satchit Ananda form, but the living entity, although part and parcel of the Lord, becomes materially contaminated when he desires to come to the material world for material enjoyment. The prescription for returning home back to Godhead is given by the Lord himself in Bhagavad Gita 9:34. Manmana bhava madbhakto majjaji mam namaskuru mam evaishyasi yukvaivam atmanam matparayanaha. Always think of me and become my devotee. Worship me and offer your homage unto me. Being completely absorbed in me, surely you will come to me. A fabulous purport. Very interesting. See, the Prabhupada is totally on a roll in this section of Bhagavatam. And where's the top? Jayanam iman utsrija vasantam purusho ita karmat man ahitam bhukte tadrishene tadena va. The living entity, while dreaming, gives up the actual living body. Though the activities of his mind and intelligence, through the activities of his mind and intelligence, he acts in another body, either as a god or a dog. After giving up this gross body, the living entity enters either an animal body or demigod's body on this planet or another planet. He thus enjoys the results of the actions of his past life. Mukum karoti vachalam hangam lagayate girim jatkripa tamaham bande sigurum dinatarinam. I was at the Walmart, coming out of the Walmart yesterday, and there's this old fellow who appeared not to be taking self-realization as the goal of life, and he's wearing a pair of glasses that had like the red heart-shaped plastic over the eyes, and he had 3 little dogs on a leash, and he was standing there with a goofy look on his face. And he said, I brought the kids out. And I said to him, what type of body do you think you will get in your next life? And he had no idea what I was talking about. But it was clear what it was going to be. He was a very elderly gentleman who didn't have long for this world. And he's serving the dog with the heart, with great love, and devotion, bringing them to the Walmart. I don't know why they bring the dog to the store. And the store is supposed to be a place for the human beings. But they bring the dog. They bring the dog here too. Although it's not a place of dogs. And it was clear that the dogs were the center of his life, the love of his life, and that he took great pleasure and happiness in serving the dog. So that's a very sad thing to see. And then what do you think will be his next birth? There's no doubt it will be a dog. And there were these little bitty dogs, little bitty white dogs with the hair over their eyes. So cute. The kids, and he was thinking I was sharing in that love he had for the dogs, but I was not particularly impressed by that poor living entity who's wasting his life, which is meant for self-realization, to become a dog in the next life. But they think this is going on. This is quite common. Actually, this is just typical how people are throwing away their lives without a thought of self-realization, just simply trying to enjoy in various ways through the instrumental, Prabhupada says, gross body. So the living entity is covered by the subtle body, which is the three material elements, mind, intelligence, and false ego. Now, generally, when we think of material elements, we think of bhumir, apo, nalo, vayu, and come, that's earth, water, fire, air, and ether, and how all the manifestations of the material energy are represented in various combinations of those elements, those gross material elements. But in that verse, Krishna says, Kam mano buddhir evacha, that also, aside from those obvious gross elements of matter, there is mind, intelligence, and false ego, which are also part of the material energy. So we think of the mind as something like special, spiritual, or whatever, but actually it's a material element. And that is the subtle body, aside from our gross body of eyes, ears, nose, tongue, genitals, anus, sense of touch, sense of smell, sense of hearing, sense of seeing. Aside from all that, then that is the gross body, but there is also the subtle body, which is the mind, the intelligence, and the false ego. That is a material covering of the spiritual living entity. So actually we are spiritual, but we're covered by these different layers of the material energy. And that false ego, a material element, covers us in such a way, Srila Prabhupada explains, that the living entity covered by the false ego thinks himself the product of matter. He's convinced, as everyone is convinced, that I am this body, I am the product of matter. And also, this covering of the material energy, it fills one with a sense of godlessness. Like, I don't have to answer to anyone, except for maybe the law and the courts, or maybe my family, but if I can get away with it, I don't have to answer to anyone. No one is watching. There was a song, I think it was Charlie Rich, what goes on behind closed doors. One of those country songs about, the nefarious affairs of men and women, generally taking place in country and western honky tonks, and then transported by pickup truck to the motel. That's what all that music is about. And I used to play that music in some of those very honky tonks, I used to call them, that would have a chicken wire over the bandstand. So that when they throw the beer bottles at you, the beer bottles roll off the chicken wire. The chicken wire is at an angle. So you get splashed, but you don't get conked in the head. Because sometimes they're very drunk and they don't like the song or they don't like the person. And then they would also sprinkle Ajax all over the concrete floors, the dance floors, because with the Ajax on the floor, then the cowboy boots slide very nicely for dancing. This is a real world experience. This is going on in the world, and especially places like the Jacksboro Highway in Jacksboro, Texas, or various honky-tonks. Horrible places, filled with sinful people performing sinful activities. And I was firsthand witness to these things, and I was doing this just as I was coming to Krishna consciousness. That was my profession. And in Houston, they fine you $20 if your phone goes off, and they insist you pay in cash at that moment. And so everyone turns their phone off before they come in the temple because they enforce it. And everyone with the phone brings a little cash just in case. So I realized, being witness to this version of reality that people were absorbed in, and then having begun to taste the nectar of the holy name and read the transcendental literatures of Srila Prabhupada, specifically Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, and Chaitanya Charitamrita, then I realized very quickly, to quote another song from another group, who were called the Animals, which is a great name for men who are like dogs, hogs, camels, and asses. They never listen to the transcendental pastimes of the Lord. Jatu nama gadagajaha. They never take up Krishna consciousness. So therefore, they're just like dogs, hogs, camels, and asses, the animals. But the animals had one song, we got to get out of this place if it's the last thing we ever do. So that's good advice. For the living entities, we have to get out of this material world and give up what are the benefits of being engaged in material activities and taking birth in a material body and being covered by the mind and the intelligence and the false ego. What are the advantages? The advantage is that one is able to suffer quite profoundly, all the while thinking that he's going to achieve some happiness in his life. But the more he struggles, the more he tries to enjoy, then the more misery he actually gets. There's a Krishna conscious formula that you can derive from the teachings of Prahlad Maharaj in the 7th canto that states, everyone is destined a certain amount of happiness and distress. So when you're born, when you take birth in this body, due to your previous activities, your purva karma, whether it be punya or papa, punya means pious activity, papa means sinful activity. Regardless, you have a combination of happiness and distress that is already destined for you, that awaits you as soon as this body is taking birth. Actually, before the body takes birth, even while in the womb, although the ordinary people don't think that. They think life begins at birth. But the suffering of the living entity is very intense in the womb also. We know from the description in the 3rd and 4th cantos, the chapter Movement of the Living Entities, Movements of the Living Entities, describes the poor living entity forced to accept a body, a developing body within a mother's womb, and what that experience is like. It ain't good. It's so bad. It's so intense. The suffering is so unbearable that at a certain point late in the term of the pregnancy, the living entity is praying to Krishna like anything that please stop this suffering. I know I've been bad, I've forgotten you, but just let me out of this place, and I will become a good devotee. I will become your devotee and live my life properly. And then as soon as he takes birth and gets the slap from the doctor, he forgets all that. It's all forgotten. One's previous life is forgotten. One's previous suffering is forgotten. Or maybe there are psychological imprints, but the details are forgotten. And one doesn't remember his position and what happened in his last life. And then, so as a living entity goes through life and he's suffering, he sometimes cries out in his agony and his misery to God, "Why am I suffering?" Which is good. That's good. That's actually the purpose of the material energy, is to give one a slap, proverbial slap, that, "Hey dummy, wake up. Why am I suffering?" As Sanatana Goswami said to Lord Chaitanya, "Ke ami, who am I? And why are the threefold miseries overwhelming me with this suffering?" But although that is the factual position of the living entity, he thinks, no, I can enjoy. Just let me do this and let me do that, and then I'll enjoy and I'll be happy. But that certain amount of happiness and distress that is his destiny, he can't really increase the happiness. There's a happiness quota you got, and you're not going to get a drop more. But by your struggle and by your performing more sinful activities, you can increase your suffering. It's like a casino, you know. The house is rigged against the player. As they say, the house always wins. So he's thinking, oh yes, let me struggle to enjoy, but he doesn't enjoy anymore. Actually, as a result of that struggle and that endeavor and that performing of sinful activities, he increases his suffering. On the spot, like John Lennon said, instant karma is going to get you. You better watch out. Yeah, it gets you. It can get you right away. It can bite you on the back immediately when trying to enjoy. So you've got a little happiness coming, and you got a little distress. You got a lot of distress coming. So don't act in such a way as to increase the distress. And you're not going to, there's nothing you can do to increase the happiness except, save and accept, to get out of the whole show by, as Prabhupada describes in this purport, engaging oneself in activities in Krishna consciousness, in the transcendental mode of goodness. And then just simply getting out of the gross body is not liberation. People think that and they commit suicide because they're so miserable and they're so suffering and they see no way out of their suffering and they just can't take it anymore. So they kill the body and they think, okay, then I'll be free. But sorry, Charlie, you will not be free. Then you're stuck in a subtle body and you can't enjoy it all. But the desires that you have cultivated lifetime after lifetime after lifetime are still with you, and you still want to enjoy it, but you can't. You don't have the apparatus. You have to have the gross body to enjoy the senses. But so it goes to someone, as Prabhupada describes in the purport, they're just stuck in the subtle body, and they can't taste any pleasure. They can't get any sense happiness because they're just in the subtle body only, and they don't have the gross senses to manipulate or use or utilize. So therefore they give trouble to those who are in gross bodies, and they try to take over their bodies to squeeze some happiness from that. And therefore it's said that the ghosts, all they do is give trouble to others who can't see them. With your eyes, you can't see the ghosts, although they have, Carolean photography and all these other things, and TV shows about going places where there's ghosts and finding the ghost and seeing the ghost and talking to the ghost. And it's all nonsense. They're really not doing anything like that. But it makes for entertaining TV. And the advertisers will put down money to fill up the commercial spots so they can fund the programming, and the producers make money. But it's all nonsense. Because they do not understand the science, and they do not understand how the material nature is actually working. And it's a fact, Prabhupada points this out, neither do the material scientists. They're trying to explain how everything works. Like Stephen Hawking's book, I forget the title of it. It's a book about time, the nature of time. He mentions the word God in the book constantly. But he has no understanding of God. And he's trying to speculate to understand how the material energy is working. And he's passed away now, but he was extremely brilliant. But he had that Lou Gehrig's disease. And so he was all like shriveled up in a wheelchair, and he couldn't speak. And he had some kind of interface thing. And he would speak in a computer voice that was, interface between like his mind and a vocal apparatus, pretty far out stuff. But he's just like that. He's brilliant, but he's being punished because of sinful activities by the material energy. And there's no happiness there. It used to be he could speak, and he would have an assistant who would like put his ear right next to his mouth. And that's how he was a lecturer in physics at Cambridge University or whatever. I saw some documentaries about it. And he did live a long time, into his 70s. But what a miserable existence. But his book about the nature of time, he doesn't understand how the material energy is working and how he is a spiritual living entity who is part and parcel of Krishna. And he's suffering due to his past misdeeds. He has no idea of the facts on the ground. So by hearing from Srimad Bhagavatam, we can get solid working understanding of what is the material energy, how is it acting, how it is acting on us, and how we are being carried away by that, and then what to do about it. What is the solution? So liberation doesn't mean you can't just and okay, I'm liberated from the body. So the body goes down on the ground, but you're still existing, covered by the mind, intelligence, and the false ego. And now because you've performed this sinful activity of suicide, which is a very sinful activity, then you are forced to suffer, wanting to enjoy it without that gross body, as we already mentioned. So that's another type of punishment. That's worse than the suffering that he was experiencing in the gross body, even though he was being so tortured by his mind and the reactions he's getting from the material energy. So escaping the gross body is no solution. Otherwise, everyone would just kill themselves and be liberated. Business over, all good, right? Doesn't work that way. Yeah, sorry. Nice try, but no reward for that act. Just punishment, more suffering. The real liberation means to become free from the subtle body, which is covering the soul, and remain as the soul in one's pure spiritual existence. And that is done through cultivation, as Prabhupada writes in today's purport, cultivation of Krishna consciousness. And he quotes 2 verses from the Gita. Janma karma cha me divyam evam yoviti tatvataha Yaktadeham punar janma naiti mameti so Arjuna. That one who devotes himself to understanding about Krishna, his appearance in this world, which we just celebrated, his activities, his transcendental activities, like dancing with the gopis and killing the demons and doing so many things, Krishna's pastimes, which he exhibits when that's why he comes to this world. That's his purpose in coming to this world, Does he come to the material world because he wants to like kick around the material energy? No, he doesn't need to do that. He's enjoying on a standard that has nothing to do with the inebriety or temporality of the material world. He has his own associates, his activities, his lila, his tasting of happiness through his own spiritual potencies, of whom Radharani is the manifestation of the embodiment of the Hladini Shakti, his transcendental pleasure potency. Radharani's appearance day is coming up on Sunday. I was trying to understand how this Ganesh Chaturthi, it's not, unless it's the fourth day, it must be the fourth day, not the 14th day. It's the fourth day, yeah. Not Chaturdasi, but Chaturthi, so it's the fourth day. And then Astami is the 8th day. So that's Sunday, 4 days after Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Yeah, okay, now I got it. Because it wasn't on my Vaishnav calendar, Ganesh Chaturthi. VaishnavCalendar.com did not have Ganesh on there. I left off. But anyway, it was a good program, the celebration of Ganesh, because it got many people to come to the temple at a time when they normally might not have come, or some of them may have not come at all. But they came for that because they're pious, especially Indian people, they're pious, and then so they celebrate the Lord, and they celebrate the demigods too, but, along with the chanting of the, Ganesh mantra was the chanting of Hare Krishna mantra, like in Chandrika's dance. We saw, though you couldn't see everything, it's so dark in here. The light's right here, and she's dancing right there, and she's in the dark. We're going to try to do something about that. Next time we have dance in the temple, we'll have some lighting, because it's so poor. You can't see her facial expressions, and that's all part of the art of the Bharatanatyam dancing, isn't it? The movement of the eyes and the expressions. Actually, in the pastimes of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Ramananda Roy, who is the master of the science of bhakti and the most advanced devotee on the planet, and the master of the science of rasa, even Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, when someone came to him, I think his name was Pradyumna Mishra, he wants to hear about Krishna, coming to Lord Chaitanya in Jagannath Puri to hear about Krishna. Lord Chaitanya sent him to Ramananda Roy to hear about Krishna. But he went there and the servant said, please take a seat. But Ramananda Roy was busy. He was training the Devadasis, who are the dancers in the temple. Deva means God, Lord Jagannath. And Dasi means the female servants. So there are these devotees, and their job is to perform artistic dances, the Odishi dance, like our two sisters did on Jamasini, those two Odishi girls. And they're very good, by the way. They're extremely accomplished. They do everything very slow. And even our sound man, Stefan, pointed out, he says, that's amazing what they're doing. He said, that's extremely hard. They're dancing very slow with these very artistic and precise movements, and they're doing it together. They're not just like, jumping and running fast, like a Bollywood dance or a Toyota commercial or whatever. That's sometimes the Bollywood movies, they're like a big Toyota commercial. Toyota commercial, they have all the cars there and all these people dancing and doing all this silly stuff. Toyotathon, special financing until the end of the month. And they do all this crazy stuff. And it's just like a Bollywood movie where they got, a cast of, 150, 200 dancers all doing these moves. And then in the center is the big star is doing the big moves. And they're very passionate, they're really passionate about that. But the Odishi dance is very expressive and artistic. And Stefan said, that's really hard to do. The mudras and the movements and the expressions all done in a very Of course they are. Done in a very deliberate, artistic, beautiful way, very controlled. So that style of Odisha dancing, that's done by the Devadasis, the servants of God, the girls of the Jagannath temple who dance for the pleasure of the deities. So Ramananda Roy, he's a man, and he's training these girls how to do these dances and moves, and how to evoke the moods and rasas of, for example, the gopis and their love for Krishna. Open the door and tell him, cool it. Thank you. So, like Rodney Dangerfield, can't get no respect. So he's doing that, and not only is he very intimately teaching these girls, he also bathing and massaging their bodies. Although he's a male and they're females, and that's just not done. And so Pradyumna Mishra waited for a long time in the house of Ramananda Roy, and finally he gave up. And he went back to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and said, well, you know, I went to see Ramananda Roy like you told, but you know, he's training these dancing girls, you know, and you're sending me to hear Krishna Katha from him, and he's like, he's hanging out with these dancing girls and he's touching them, and you know, and all this kind of stuff. And then Lord Chaitanya explained to him that Ramananda Roy, you cannot understand the activities of Ramananda Roy. He is completely on the transcendental platform. First of all, he's the Gopi Vishaka. That's his real identity, although he's appearing in the male body, just like Rupa and Sanatana Jiva Goswami. These are all, you know, Rupa Manjari. They're all gopis and manjaris who are servants in the party of Radha and Krishna. But they're appearing in this world as the associates of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in male bodies. But they're not male, they're not female. This Ramananda Roy is just not some guy. You've got it all wrong. No one understands the transcendental mellows of love of Krishna better than him. And he is on the complete spiritual platform. Lord Chaitanya said, even I myself cannot do what Ramananda Roy does. And he's Krishna himself. But he's teaching Pradyumna Mishra by this, explaining to him the position of Ramananda Roy. He said, if I even see you like a wooden doll in the form of a woman, my mind becomes agitated. There was on the public radio, they were interviewing one politician in Miami, and he was on the phone and driving in his car while he's being interviewed. And there was one billboard there, a salacious billboard with the form of a woman. And he was looking at it, and then he had a wreck while he was on the radio interview. And then he explained what happened to him. I looked at this picture of this woman's breast up on the billboard, and I wrecked my car. This is why he's on live radio. It was pretty funny. So, Lord Chaitanya is saying, even if I see it like, you know, even if she's a Barbie doll. He didn't say plastic, he said wooden, but, you know, we can extrapolate in modern terms. You know, they don't make dolls out of wood anymore, they're plastic. Well, even if I see that, my mind becomes agitated. And he's what? He's like, you know, the greatest sannyasi who ever appeared. And he's saying that about himself. But Ramananda Roy, that's a whole different story. He sees himself as a maidservant of Krishna, and he's doing his service in assisting the other maidservants of Krishna to properly do their dancing, to express the proper sentiments and mood of the love of the gopis as an art form for the pleasure of Lord Jagannath. Isn't that amazing? I mean, we can hardly conceive of that because of the type of quote unquote entertainment that we're used to here in the Western world and all over the whole material world. But what Ramananda Roy is doing with those Devadasis is a completely spiritual activity. And he said that the mind of Ramananda Roy is like stone. It doesn't move. He's not affected by lust. He's just completely fixed up in Krishna consciousness. Very wonderful instruction. Your mileage may vary. Do not try this at home. Speaking of Miami, they say the best thing about Miami, what, it's so close to the United States. It's like a third world country. And so it's like a Latin American city. So they have one beach there that's like a topless beach. And so I know there's one devotee. Yeah, he's an older guy from New York. He goes, yeah, I go to that beach. I said, it doesn't bother me. I'm not attracted. And I said, then why are you going there? I said, I've never been to that beach. I'm never going to that beach. I have no business at that beach. Why are you going there? Chant japa? I don't think so. He was busted. At that point, he was busted. If you're truly detached, you would not go there. And don't tell us how detached you are, because the proof is you're going there. So we know. He was like, oh yeah, you got me. Single guy, older guy. It's pretty funny. So it is said that in the Bhagavatam, only Nara and Narayan Rishi are free from the attraction, the sexual attraction of this world. And they're incarnations of Krishna. Krishna himself tells Arjuna that previously Krishna and Arjuna, they were Nara and Narayan. In the 10th canto, where Krishna and Arjuna go to retrieve the dead sons of Sandipani Muni, and they go through the coverings of the universe. And they meet Mahavishnu. You familiar with that part of the Bhagavatam? It's in the Krishna book, 10th canto. Very wonderful, very far out pastime. Transcendental, beyond space and times, makes science fiction look like child's play and foolishness, which it is. I was a big science fiction fan when I was a teenager. Read, over 1,000 novels and hundreds of collections of short stories. And then I found Krishna consciousness. And as soon as I found Krishna consciousness, here is the real science, and not speculation and just mundane literature about men and women and drama and politics and all the, science fiction is basically like cowboy literature, only it's about space instead of the Old West. But it's the same thing, the human experience and the attachments and the attractions of the material energy and people trying to enjoy and people suffering. That's all about that. So I was a big fan of that. And that was my Shastra as a teenager, unfortunately. Very unfortunately. Would have been much better to be absorbed in the stories of Bhagavatam, the 10th canto, about Krishna and Arjuna passing through the coverings of the universe and going to see Mahavishnu. Mahavishnu says, my incarnation is Krishna and Arjuna. So nice to see you. Thank you for coming. What a transcendental rasa. So finally, Pradyumna Mishra got to speak to Ramananda Roy and hear from him some Krishna Katha. And then after hearing about his real position from Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and then hearing again from Ramananda Roy, Krishna Katha, he could understand that this is no regular dance teacher, for the being engaged by the temple. This is the topmost devotee. When Ramananda Roy and Lord Chaitanya were first met by the river Godavari in South India, and they were discussing transcendental topics, and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was asking questions of Ramananda Roy and trying to elicit from him they went through various levels of understanding transcendental subject matters and what is the real duty of the living entity. And Ramananda Roy was giving some kind of like standard answers. Well, Varnashram Dharma is the highest perfection, and such that's external. I reject that. They kept going, and they got further and further into love of Krishna and the 5 rasas, and then finally they were discussing the Madhurya Ras. And then Ramananda Roy said that I don't even know what I'm speaking. I'm just like a doll, a wooden doll who's on a string, and you're pulling the strings. You're asking the questions to me, but actually you're the one who's making me speak. So I'm just a puppet in your hands, and I'm speaking as you are making me speak, just like a master musician plays an instrument like a sitar, and he manipulates the strings and makes all these beautiful sounds. He said, I'm just an instrument in your hands, and you're making me speak. And he said, until now, I never thought that anyone could go this far in spiritual understanding, but you're pushing the conversation and making me speak these transcendental topics. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was very enlivened by this conversation, and he kept pushing Ramananda Roy further and further. Go further, go further. You know more. Tell me more, tell me more. Finally, as they were discussing the pastimes of Radha and Krishna, the pinnacle of spiritual understanding, which is the Madhurya Ras, and they, as Lord Chaitanya began to elicit more details from Ramananda Roy, they came to a certain point, and then Lord Chaitanya put his hand over Ramananda Roy's mouth. Okay, that's enough. Don't speak anymore. Why did he do that? Why would he do that? Because he knows this is being included in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, and that you can go so far, but we can't speak about these things. We can't write this in the book. So you have to stop. He actually put his hand over his mouth. That's one of my favorite leelas of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. According to Ramananda Roy, Lord Chaitanya is making him go further in transcendental understanding. But when he gets to the highest limits of the love of Radha and Krishna, then he makes him stop. Okay. And then Chaitanya Mahaprabhu wouldn't discuss these topics with ordinary persons. He wasn't preaching about the highest aspects of Radha and Krishna. Prabhupada tells us, with a few people, Ramananda Roy, Swarup Damodar, Sikhi Mahiti, with a few people he would speak on these elevated topics. But otherwise, for everyone else, Kirtan, Prasad, chanting, dancing. So that is the method of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. But it is for us, it's very wonderful through the mercy of Krishnadas Kaviraj, who was empowered to write the topics of Chaitanya Charitamrita. He was empowered by the Madan Mohan deity, by Krishna himself, to give us these glimpses into the higher realms of Krishna consciousness. And rest assured that that is what awaits you. These understandings, these topics of love of God, they await you in the development of Krishna consciousness. Maybe not next week. Actually, for sure, not next week. A guaranteed not next week, okay? But once you begin the path of bhakti, and you follow it properly, then you reach the ultimate goal. And you go back home, back to Godhead. And all these things are revealed along the way to the sincere practitioner. As the creeper of bhakti develops and then takes shelter at the lotus feet of Krishna in the spiritual sky, these things are gradually revealed to the devotee bit by bit by bit. So glorious things await those who stay on the path of Krishna consciousness. And once having begun and following nicely, it is actually guaranteed that one will achieve this topmost result. It's guaranteed. And that guarantee is given by Srila Prabhupada himself. He said, I guarantee you follow this process and you will go back to Godhead at the end of this life. Okay, I'll take it. I like that guarantee. Sign me up. I will pay my money. What is that? Payment of your money. That's your investment of your heart and soul. That's called faith, where you invest yourself fully in the practice and ways of Krishna consciousness. All right, so we stop here. Questions, comments, realizations?
I was listening on you brought up Stephen Hawking, and I think he's the greatest examples of extraordinarily envious personality. He always blasphemed God, and then, it's like, look at his position. It's one of those examples. It's like, look at his life, and then he's blaspheming God constantly, and always saying God doesn't exist, and people are foolish. Yet he's being subjected to the punishments of God.
Well, my reading of his book, he spoke very interestingly about God. I was impressed that he brought up God so much. That's why they say, atheist. What atheist means? Someone who doesn't believe in God. What is in the word atheist? Theist. Boy, he's atheist. What is he talking about? He's talking about God. You can't escape. No one escapes this vanishing position. No one escapes the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He may come to you as death. He may come to you in the form of punishment. So atheist means he's a theist. Deep in his heart, like they say that in times of war, where the enemy is raining down bombs and soldiers are in the foxhole, there are no atheists in the foxhole. Everyone's praying like mad. When I was going to college, it was right at the end of the Vietnam War, and a lot of young guys my age were coming back from Vietnam and going to college on the GI Bill, and they're paying for their tuition. And there was this one fella, he was on a helicopter gunship in Vietnam, and they got shot down out of the sky. And then the next thing they knew, they didn't know what happened, but the next thing they knew, they were standing on the ground about 50 feet away from their helicopter as it was, burning into flames. It was like the hand of God had taken them out of the helicopter and placed them standing on the ground. And he, on the spot, became a born-again Christian. Although previously he was a big atheist. And that's always the way, growing up in Texas, there's a lot of born-again Christians, and you hear this stuff. It was big, popular back then. But he was an atheist, but then he became a believer in God because of some, quote, miracle, because his life was spared in a miraculous way, along with the other, 4 or 5 guys in his gunship crew. So he was a very interesting guy. And I met him right as I was becoming a devotee. So we had some conversations, and they weren't always agreeable about his form of, so-called faith, which is completely blind and sentimental. So even those are atheists, but the way Stephen Hawking writes about God, I read that book a long time ago. What's it called? History of Time?
I read a lot of different books, I'm not sure.
That's his most famous book. But he mentions God in there very consistently. And it really, it impressed me. I read it as a devotee. I thought, well, I never read this. I got to get around to this. And he was talking about God a lot in his History of Time. And I thought he was a complete, materialistic atheist, which he is, but still he's mentioning God because everybody else is talking about God. And, you want the book to have some meaning and reach people, then you got to have God in there. So very interesting. You can't get away from Krishna's potency.
There's one statement.
Even though he's a demon, of course.
There's one statement in the 5th canto that says that one who is sinful because they don't know, they have one type of punishment. And one who knows better but is still sinful, they have a different type of punishment. But the worst punishment is reserved for those who are downright atheists.
Yeah, the Mayavadis. That's why the association of Mayavadis is like real poison. Okay, we already over the time. Anyone else real quickly? Acha. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.
Worse than Stephen Hawking, Neil deGrasse Tyson.